All right, everyone. I have Lindsay Salamone here, and I'm really excited to chat with her because she is a fellow doula. So I'm really going to nerd out today. We don't have a lot of doula episodes. So she's a full spectrum birth worker, pre and postnatal performance specialist. She comes to us from New York, so a little bit east of me. And we are going to dive into all things doula, birth, postpartum today. So if you are in that season of life, this is definitely an episode that you are going to want to listen to. So thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
very
really
excited to
excited.
be here.
Yeah, me too. So I'm before we dive in, I'd love for you to tell us what made you want to become a doula.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be short with it. Um, I it basically starts with one of my closest friends from college. Back in 2018, she was pregnant with her first baby, and I made a commitment to her without her really realizing it that I would be as supportive as I possibly could throughout her pregnancy and into her postpartum. And once the baby was born, it became, you know, um, a weekly date for us to get together. I would do whatever she needed around the house, let her sleep and nap and shower and all of those, really important things. Brought her food and just wanted to make sure that I was a super solid support system for her. And one evening, I remember we were sitting on the couch and she said to me, you should really think about becoming a doula. And she had her own birth doula. And I said, can you just explain to me what that is? Because I've heard the word doula and I've heard about them, but I don't really know what they are. And she explained to me, what her birth doula did for her. And then she said, but you are really acting as a postpartum doula for me. What
Right.
you've been doing is what a postpartum doula does. And the more we talked about it, the more interested I became in it. And um, she reached out to her doula and got a little bit of information, about local training in my area. I'm located in Buffalo, New York. And I had been looking, I started looking the internet for training. And soon enough, so this was like in February of 2018. And by April, I had signed up to do training with a local doula agency, and then it just went from there. By September of 2018, I was at my first birth. I had done, um, the postpartum training, childbirth education, breastfeeding, all that stuff, and then once we got into um, 2020, especially during the shutdown, I really thought about like, what do I want to bring to this work, and like, what else do I want to know? I'm always wanting to educate myself and learn more, and I decided to take the full spectrum training with Cornerstone trainings, and that was changing. It was just amazing, and I really took away a lot from it, and I felt even more prepared to go into this work and to serve more people. And so now things just kind of really took off after that, and now here I am, um, doing this work and constantly trying to expand my knowledge and um, just really loving it. Just yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
that
how I
sounds
got here.
amazing. Well, when you described what you were doing for your friend, I'm like, oh, so you were basically a postpartum doula for
Yeah.
her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. And I had no idea at the time. And it really became a passion for me because I really saw firsthand, what she was going through. And she wasn't my first friend to have kids. And I, had done it a little bit for other friends here and there, but I really, you know, jumped all in to make sure that she had my full support. And it really, you know, sparked this light in me that was like, oh my goodness, this is the work I want to do.
Yeah. It's it's interesting because like it's for me, I started it forever ago. Like it was 2012, I think, when I did my first birth. And I did it kind of like that year and worked on my certification. Then I kind of stepped away for a while and then kept coming back to it. And you'll have to tell me like what it is for you. But for me, it's like once you know certain information and then everyone around you is having babies and they're telling you something different. You're hearing the stories of like, oh, well, my doctor told me my pelvis is too small, so we scheduled a C-section. My doctor said that I have to wean because I'm pregnant. My doctor said, like you start hearing these other things and you're like, what? What?
Yep.
You're like, this is supported by evidence, research, physiological birth, and you can't unsee it. And it
Yes.
just like becomes this passion of like, I have to share this message. I have to help people have the experience that they deserve to have. So whether you are wanting a medicated birth or an unmedicated birth, it's like I feel like there's this misconception with doulas that we only do home births. But it's like you just deserve to have the information, then make the decision for yourself. Like I don't care if you have a medicated or unmedicated birth, or because of certain risks, you're like, you know what, I'm really feeling a cesarean is the way that I want to go. It's like, okay, perfect. You have the informed consent, you have the
Hmm.
education and the knowledge to decide what's best for you. There's nothing forced upon you, or you're not
Hmm.
scared into things. And that's like the information you can't unsee. And it's like, I have to share this.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. You are spot on with that. I feel like I've also recently run into people who think that doulas only work in hospitals now.
Hmm.
I've been getting a lot of that, because of the advocacy portion. And sometimes I hear, well, I'm having a birth at a birth center, so why do I need a doula? I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a birth at home, so why do I need a doula? I
Mm-hmm.
don't, why do I need a doula there? And um, we do more than just advocacy, obviously. Um, and we support, we provide that emotional support, the mental support, the physical support to the birthing person and their partner, the education. And I think education goes hand in hand with the advocacy,
Right.
because the doula shouldn't be just expected to come into the room with you at your birth and be able to have a certain outcome, like that the doula is responsible for a certain outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It goes, the doula should be able to you know educate you as well in advance, so that along the same things that the doula knows, that you can, um that you're just as prepared and educated, about your choices, about, um, all of the possibilities of things. When I sit down with my clients at their prenatal appointments, I always like to talk about all possibilities, all scenarios. I also, um,
Mm-hmm.
like to make sure that they, like I said, are fully informed. And I think that goes hand in hand with, advocacy. But again, it's not just about that. It's also the emotional, mental, physical support of having somebody there, somebody outside of your partner too, um, somebody that is just a third party person that is fully invested in you and your experience. And um, and that is something that I really cherish about birth, is those, um those moments that I can have with my client, um the intimate moments, and the, empowering moments and supportive moments, and, and I mean, I love all the advocacy part of it too, but but yeah,
Right.
we do it all, and we're in all birth center or settings. Sorry,
Hmm. Hmm.
we are in all birth settings, including birth centers and homes and hospitals.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you touched on like the home birth piece too, because I feel like doulas are definitely needed in that situation as well. Um, for all the physical laboring and things like that. And I also like been in the hospital setting. I just have a lot of people who say like, "Oh, I'm going to get an epidural, so why would I need a doula?" And I'm like, for so many reasons.
Yeah.
Like I've been at so many births where the epidural didn't work,
Hmm.
where there's a side effect
Yep.
that you need help with, that we can still get you into different positions to labor in, helping that baby move, rotate down the birth canal, and not just side to side with a peanut ball. Like depending on your epidural, we could even possibly get you into hands and knees or use a squat bar. Like yeah, I was at a birth where there was a shoulder dystocia, and so in her, she had some control of her legs, so we were like all over the bed trying to get this baby out,
Yeah.
unstuck and working with different positions because you need that. You need to be in different positions to help your baby um, come out sometimes, uh, and then also, what if you can't get the epidural in time, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Like sometimes things just happen that aren't in your control. Like
Yep.
you are like, okay, I want it. And then they're like, well, the anesthesiologist is in something and they're not going to be there for an hour. And then you're having that baby,
Yep.
like all these
Yep.
things have been situations that I have been at. So,
Yes. It happens. It happens. And then also, I think some people don't realize too that, like, oh, well, the nurse staff is there. Well, the nurse staff is
multiple.
going to be coming in and out of the room. They've got multiple different patients there. And to have a doula, that is a consistent person that is there for the entire experience, that is able to just consistently focus on you and support you and keep you moving and keep you hydrated, keep you fed, keep you all of the things, make sure that your partner sits down for a moment. Like I always say to the partners, I need you to make sure that you are ready when it's go time. and and also helping them too. I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to have a doula that can um, you know coach the partner into
Hmm.
doing things. It's great to be able to create that for the couple, because then it's an intimate bonding moment between them, and showing the partner, okay, here's what you can do. You can place your hands here. You can apply pressure here. And not having it be just the doula. So it's that balance, and the same goes at a home birth, because the midwife might have to take care of her equipment, or whatever she's got to do. She might not always be able to be present in that moment, and the doula at the home birth can do that for you
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm. Yeah. And the majority of home births I've attended, I've gotten there before the midwife and like
Hmm.
helped them labor, especially if it's like multiple babies, or I mean, multiple births that's not their
Yes.
first. And so it's a lot like as soon as you're like, oh, I had a contraction, your midwife isn't going to show up. They're like, okay, call me when it's serious,
Yeah.
like so your doula is kind of there too to help with some stuff. So it's yeah, I mean, there's so many different situations, and I'm glad you touched on the partners too, because sometimes a lot of people that have ended up hiring me too, the partner's been hesitant and been
Hmm.
like, I feel like I'm going to be replaced, but research supports. And every birth I've been at, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were here, because research supports that the laboring person looks at their partner in a better light after having a doula, because like you said, we give them a role. Like,
Yes.
here's how you can support right now. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can show up. Because your partner's not a labor expert. They do not know what's going on. So when certain
Yep.
things happen, when you start like shaking uncontrollably, they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Was she having a seizure? Like, what's happening? Because I've heard
Hmm.
that asked. And it's like, no, these are the hormones flooding her system. Like
Hmm.
there's so much happening that we can explain and help with
Yep.
that. if the nurse isn't in the room or the midwife, like different things where we are kind of that calm, cool presence
Yep. Yeah.
when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I
Mhm.
100% agree.
So I'd love to talk about choosing the right provider, because that would probably be one of my biggest tips. I think taking a childbirth education course is really important too, but to anybody, choosing the right provider can make or break your experience. And
Yes.
that's something I'm so, 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 so passionate about. Because I have friends that are like, oh, I'm going to go for a VBAC this time. And I'm like, well, who are you going to? And they're like, oh, they're going back to their provider who told them that they had a big baby, scheduled a C-section, or induced them before, like they didn't even have a high bishop score or anything. It was their first baby, induced them before their due date, said they had a big baby, ended up in a cesarean, and that's who they're going back to. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, do you really want to be back? Or like, like
Yeah.
that's what makes and breaks your experience. Like, why would you go back to the provider who put you in this situation?
Yep. So I think it's all about making them think about that stuff, right? And I've started to change how I do my consultations. I actually start that moment, that conversation at the consultation. Whether this person hires me or not, my goal is to make sure that they walk away um, thinking and
Yeah.
remembering the conversation. So I have started to now, ask them how's everything going? Um, how are your appointments with your provider? How do you feel about your provider? Have you been able to talk to them about what you would like for your birth or what you don't want for your birth? How has their reaction been to that? Um, and then if they tell me that they want specific things or they don't want specific things, I will ask them if they've relayed that to their provider yet. And if they say no, I will say, do that and pay attention to their reaction. How
Right.
do they react? What is your answer? Or what is the answer that they give you? Um, I also ask them, did you tell your provider that you want a doula?
Right.
How did they react when you told them that you want a doula? Um, then I basically encourage them to think of it as, I say to them, so you're here with a consultation with me and you're interviewing me to see if I'm the best doula for you. I want you to go to every prenatal appointment and do the same thing with your provider because you are the hiring manager and you can choose at any time to walk away if you don't feel respected, if you don't feel listened to, if you feel rushed, if you feel like your questions aren't being answered. So take those moments and follow your gut. Um, and if you feel at any point that this person is not for you, you can change the provider and that there are other options.
Right.
I also do the same thing when they tell me about where they plan to give birth.
Right.
The number one thing I hear in consultations is when somebody is planning to give birth in a hospital, they say, I'm planning to give birth in a hospital. That way, when in case something bad happens, I will be right. I will be right there. Everything will be right there. And I always say, okay, in your appointments with your provider, have they given you any reason to believe that, you're a high risk pregnancy? Is there any medical, problems that you are experiencing that would lead you to believe that something could go wrong? And if there is, then that's a different story. If somebody has to give birth in a hospital because they have medical issues that need to be monitored, then yes, that is the right place for them to give birth. But if not, then I ask them to consider how do they feel when they think about a hospital and
Right.
giving birth in a hospital? What is that gut reaction when you think about walking into a hospital and giving birth there? Is that really what you want? Because there are other options. And I said this to a couple fairly recently, and the partner turned and looked at me and said, "Thank you so much for saying that. That's the best advice anybody's ever given to us." And I realized in that moment that they won't ever forget that. Now,
Hmm.
did they hire me? No. But that's okay. Like, it's okay that I wasn't the right doula for them, but they walked away from that conversation more informed
Hmm.
with more choices. They didn't know that birth centers existed when I was speaking to them until I told them. They didn't know that there were midwives even available in our area until I told them.
Hmm.
And so now they can, whoever they do find, now they go to, and they're a little more informed. It's, and hopefully if they've gone home and they've thought about, how they feel and whether or not they like their provider. And I just think it is really important to get that going right at the start, because um, I I think the longer you wait, sometimes, it's, I mean, you can switch whenever.
Hmm.
But it is better if you make that decision sooner, and especially if you know in your gut something is not right. I don't feel right with this provider. I don't, you know have a great connection with them. Or maybe it's one person in the practice and you're like
Right.
afraid that that one person in this practice is going to end up on call on the day of your birth. So that's a crummy, that's crummy, because you're like hoping that person isn't there, and that that can set up feelings of fear, and just that all can, it's not helpful for when you go into labor and staying calm and helping your uterus to do its work. So yes, I start those conversations early, very, very
Hmm.
early, right at the
Hmm.
consultation.
Yeah, that is super important. It's so important. There's a hospital here that I'm like not going to name them, but my pelvic floor therapist, who's like a miracle worker, she's also a chiropractor. I might be in love with her. She's so amazing. Like I'm like, okay, as soon as I'm pregnant next time, I'm calling you for just do everything you do because it's awesome. And she she gets so many clients who always birth at this one place, and she's like, I can't tell you like how many people walk in here and are like, oh my gosh, yes, thank God I was there, they saved the baby. And she's like, why are all these babies needing saved
Right.
in this hospital, in this environment? Like and a lot of times things are worded in a way that the doctor's like, oh, thank God you had me. Like, oh, we had a nuchal cord, like the cord was wrapped around the baby's neck. It's like, okay, that happens like 30% of the time. Like
Hmm.
it's not, it's usually 99% of the time it's completely fine and safe. So
Yeah.
they're like, oh, the cord was around the neck and this and that. And I'm like, yeah, I'd say a lot of the births I go to, the cords are wrapped around them, like it's a normal thing that occurs in birth, and that's not
Yep.
something that they necessarily need to be saved from.
Right.
So, or like, oh, the heart rate dropped, and and we know that continuous monitoring leads to higher cesarean rates. So it's like, yeah, they're looking for that to drop to intervene, like, but it doesn't create better outcomes. It's
Hmm.
not saving you, it's not saving your baby, it's just giving you a cesarean. So, um, yeah, that information is so important. And it is interesting, like trusting your body, and finding a provider that also trusts your body, that you can ask those questions. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And you can really, like you're saying, just gauge so much information from how they answer the question. So if you're like, hey, how do you feel about VBAC? And they could be like, oh, well, we could try it. That's not really the answer that you want
Yeah.
to hear. You want to be like, oh, you're a low risk client. Like you're a low risk birth. Your previous one was because of this. Like, absolutely, let's go for it. Like, and not, well, I mean, we'll see if it works. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, that doesn't sound reassuring at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love all of that, and the environment, like setting the environment up. Like, how do you feel about birthing in a hospital? I always encourage like everybody who is going to birth in a hospital, um, to set the environment up, because that's like been proven to help too. Like have the lights dim, bring LED candles, bring a pillow from home, like make it as cozy and comfortable as possible. Like nobody
Yeah.
wants to be laboring under bright LED lights. Like
Yeah.
in nature, like people or animals find a dark, quiet place to birth.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
we're just like, here, go to the hospital. And a lot of times, like certain things will happen and our body responds. So if you're not feeling safe, your labor could stop or slow down. And then they're going to put you on Pitocin to speed things up. And it's like you
Mm-hmm.
need to give your body time to adjust to these different environments or create that safe space. And if you're not going to feel safe there, maybe consider a different one.
Yep. Yep. I was I had was at a birth once where in the hospital where I had like spa music going, and I had some essential oil. I had just put it on a wet washcloth and a couple wet washcloths, and I had them near my client's head so that she could smell them. And she was, in getting ready to push, and there was, that long pause, and everybody was super silent, and the nurse just turned to the OB and said, "Wow, it's really relaxing in here. It's like a spa. This is really nice." And the OB was like, "Yeah, I don't feel like I'm in a hospital right now." And I'm just standing there like, "Wow, who would have thought that you could turn this into a very common, relaxing experience, and it doesn't have to be crazy and hectic and loud and bright, and oh my gosh." And it
Mm-hmm.
was nice then, because they actually, like, I had that music on my phone going loudly, and it didn't really give them a chance to chat, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes they like to have the chat, and I'm there focusing on my client and her breathing and her partner, and we're in the zone and in the moment, and they're chatting about whatever they ate for lunch, and and it's driving me nuts. This time, with that music going, and I just at the volume I had it, they didn't even have a moment to really chat. They just got so into it that it ended up being very quiet, and really just a beautiful moment. And I was just like, yeah, guys, it doesn't always have to be how you experience every day.
Right, right, totally. Yeah. I always do like bring all that stuff too. There's a hospital here that they recently rolled out this form that they want your doula to sign saying that
uh,
they're
yeah.
and you can't bring diffusers now.
Oh.
Yeah, you can't advocate for them.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
it says I will not perform any medical procedures, and it's like, yeah, duh, I don't know
Well, yeah.
who would try to do that. Like, what doula? I mean, there are. I mean, we could talk about that too. Like, not everyone in the profession is like bound by an ethical code, and
Right.
have heard some like horror stories of doulas where I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry that was your experience, because that's
Yeah.
not at all who we are, what we're
Hmm.
supposed to be. Like,
Hmm.
I have heard stories and I'm like, dang it, like who's giving us a bad rap?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I did have to sign one of those papers so far. At just one of our hospitals. I have not been to that hospital since. It's been a little over a year. And but I remember like being taken off guard, and then they wanted my certification. And I was like, "Oh, I don't carry my certificates in my bag. Like, I literally don't carry my certificates in my backpack." But I had a badge on, so that was like enough for them.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, this it's getting to the point now with these forums that they're having doulas sign. I heard that some of them, they're now like saying that they've been approved by DONA, or they're part of DONA regulations. And the thing is, not where DONA doesn't like oversee all the doulas. Like, they are not the um all
Encompassing.
yes, encompassing training and certifying of doulas. There's so many different certifications. They don't regulate everything. So when I heard that, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, this is, and now there's doulas that are refusing to work in certain hospitals because of that. And I understand why.
Right.
And also, it's unfortunate at the same time because then there's a lot of clients that are not going to have that support that they need. So it's they're making it harder now, and
Right.
it's
Right.
frustrating. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
Well, that kind of leads me to my next point, which is about advocacy, because I did my original certification through Dona, and I was
Okay.
taught that we're not advocates. Like, I remember my original thinking of what a doula was I'm like, oh, I'm going to help advocate. And they're like, no, 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 we don't advocate. Like, we provide emotional support, physical support. We don't speak on their behalf, all these different things. And I really took that on for a really long time until this last year. And when my certification lapsed with them, first of all, I don't want to like hate on them for like people who have gone through them, but like even their recertification process is such bull. It's
Mm,
such bull. It's like
mm,
it's so much work. The directions don't even make sense. Like the things that you have to do, you have to attend so many like meetings and these other things. And it's like I'm out there being a doula. Like
right.
I'm not keeping up with your bull.
Yeah.
And then rolling out things like that we're not advocates. And it's like you know the birth numbers in the United States, right? You know that maternal death rates are increasing over the last 20 years. If somebody's hiring me like to be their doula and something happens in birth where they're not being listened to and something's going wrong, I'm supposed to keep my mouth shut? Are you kidding me? No way. Like,
Yeah.
and so I feel like I decided to go through a different organization
Hmm.
um for my recertification, and it was that I just realized a lot kind of like through going through their program, like some of the stuff that does roll out. I mean, I thought my initial training and stuff was very thorough, it was really great. But I kind of had that ingrained in me. So now I'm like, how do I advocate?
Yeah.
Like, I'm also like a people pleaser and a pushover. So a recovering one, because I'm getting really good at not. But I'm like, okay, so if something does go wrong, like normally, like even the hospitals who have that piece of paper, I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this? So, I mean, my thing usually, like when the provider comes in, is like, okay, I really think we need to do this. I'm like, I just look at the client. I'm like, do you want some time to think about it? Like that's
Yep.
my go-to. And it's
Yep.
like, you can tell them, like, listen, I need some time. If you don't have a doula there, ask for time, ask for
Hmm.
time to pray, to meditate, whatever, like, even if you're not religious,
Yep.
just to give you time to really think about things and soak things in. And it's like, okay, like once the provider's gone, then I have these conversations with the client and stuff. But I'm like, man, if there was a situation where I had to advocate, like if the client's like, no, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel right, and they're like, oh, you're fine, it's like, no, they're not. Like,
Yep.
like, because I have people who those births have happened to, like
Yeah.
somebody close to me, one of my relatives recently, or I guess a year ago, her daughter just turned 1. I was asking her about her birth story a couple months ago because I hadn't seen her. And um, she said she got an epidural and it like completely wore off, and she could feel everything, and she had that urge to push, and she's like, you guys, like, she's like screaming and whatever, and they were telling her to be quiet. They were like, oh, be quiet, it doesn't hurt, like, and she's like, no, I'm feeling it. They're like, honey, like, you're not really feeling it. She's like, no, I'm feeling it. And they're like, okay, well, you can't push. She's like, I can't control what's happening. Like, my baby's coming out of me. And they were just like dismissing her. And I'm like getting enraged listening to this story. And I'm like, I wish that I was there. Like,
Hmm.
I wish I was there. But then I'm like, how would have I advocated for her without, because I just like see red because I
Yeah.
get pissed off. So
Yep.
I'm like, how do I advocate for her without getting kicked out of the hospital or giving a bad name to doulas or like whatever? So it's like, how do I approach like those situations? Because I feel like for so long, like I just didn't feel like I could advocate because I'm like, oh, that's not what doulas do.
Yep. Yeah. This is a constant conversation that I have with several fellow doulas that I work with. So, on top of having my own business, I also work with a local agency as well. And we get together once or twice a year, all of us, when we have the time, and we sit and talk about this stuff. And it, we, it's, I think it's how you approach them first, the medical providers, if they even acknowledge you too. That's the other thing. I feel like sometimes I am just like a piece of gum on the floor to them. Like they just
Right.
step on me and like they just don't even notice that I'm there. Um, and then other times you get that rare provider that looks you in the eye, calls you by your first name, shakes your hand, like, and then you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But I think it's I always try to kill them with kindness first, and I walk in, and whether the nurse or the OB likes it or not, I I force them to look me in the eye. I will stick out my hand. And if they don't acknowledge it, then at least my client sees.
Yeah.
And I, and I will start off, um, just being as nice as possible. And I will do things like, oh, can you explain a little bit more about what you're talking about and why she needs that, or why you're suggesting this medicine or whatever it is. And then they'll they'll stop and they'll do that and they'll be like, oh yeah, okay, sure. And so I do tend to interject in a way that like try to do it just like how they can word things a certain way to make it seem like yeah, it's okay to do this, this is great, or we're just going to do this because it's routine. Like I try to do that in how I approach them. Like use um their own language, so to speak, on how they, when they talk to my clients, I try to do the same thing and see if I can get them to either be um, real with us and what's going on and why, or to give us the evidence of whatever intervention they're suggesting, like why do we need this? Um, and it's something that I'm still like learning too. Like this is all um kind of trial and error for me, because sometimes I will go into a birth situation and it doesn't always go like that. Like I feel like I don't even have moments where I can do that with the provider. Sometimes it just moves so fast that I'm um it can be a lot. It can be a lot and overwhelming, and you're like, oh my goodness, okay, I know I gotta say something, I gotta step in. So it's just those moments like you said where it's like, okay, can we have a moment to just think about things, or do you want to take a moment to think with your partner or talk about this, or have whatever, to my client, um so that we can stop and talk. But it's navigating the advocacy is hard. There's no like you said, we started this work with them telling us that we're not advocates. And I wasn't trained through DONA, but I was trained by doulas who came from DONA. Like
Hmm.
they were that's where their certification was, and then they created their own certification here locally, and that it was the same thing. So I was terrified in the beginning. I was like, oh, I can't say anything, like, because
Hmm.
I'm going to get in trouble. And they make you feel like you're at such risk if you know if you do anything or say anything. And now um now it's I obviously a lot of people are realizing that's not the case. Like we need to be able to step up and say something. It's just navigating that. And I think it basically just comes down to building some sort of relationship or communication with the provider. um and then and one of my friends even said that she will pull the providers aside when she first gets there, like outside of the room, and say like, I'm not here to work against you, I want to work with you, like, and I haven't done that yet with a provider, um maybe I will next time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard though when your provider keeps saying stupid stuff though.
Oh gosh.
And
Yes.
how do you like say no? So like how do you have your clients like when they've been educated on, because this happened to me not too long ago, like just educated on like eating and drinking in labor and things like that. And then they're like, they come in and they're like, oh, sorry, hun, like I can't have you be eating right now. And I'm like, yeah, you can.
I usually, honestly, when it comes to something like that, I've had clients in the past, they'll just stop, and then as soon as the provider walks out of the room, I'm just like, you can keep eating.
Mhm.
You
Right,
can keep
right.
eating. I don't. Yeah, um, it's hard. It's hard. It sometimes the provider too can be very intimidating feeling like
Right,
it.
right.
They come in and it just makes you feel like they want you to feel like you're not supposed to be there or you're not really a part of the process. So it is really hard sometimes to figure out how to say no. And you just have to get creative with it. And I don't have like I don't have it all figured out yet. Like I said, I'm trying to like still navigate it, but it's um it's definitely a learning process, but I feel like it's something that I have become really passionate about, is that, making sure that um I figure out how to advocate
Yeah,
for my client best in that moment. and
yeah.
and also, like I said, part of the advocacy is making sure that your client is educated. And
Hmm.
I was recently at a birth where like the client, she was asking all these questions during the middle of these massive contractions, or in between massive contractions, and like I just was blown away by the fact that she was so present in between each one, and she was able to ask these questions. um and she did a great job. And it was because we talked about a lot of things in the prenatal appointments. Um and so, yeah, I it's oh there's so much to this work.
Oh, I know, I know. And that's the other thing too, like it can be hard, I feel like, especially, I mean, this is something I struggle with, is asking for money as a doula.
Oh,
And that's like been really hard for me because I just want everyone to have one. And
yeah.
then, but like also, there's so much that goes into it, not only like being on
Yeah.
call 24/7,
Hmm.
that's a lot. Like, you
Yeah.
can't, if you're on call for a birth, like, I'm not going out to have a drink with my friends.
Hmm.
I'm like, there's certain things, like this weekend's my great niece's birthday party out of town. Like if I was on call for a birth, it's like I can't go.
Yep.
Like there's just certain things that go into it. And then even like me leaving my kids, finding childcare, things like that. It's so much harder than just clocking in, clocking out,
Right.
and things like that. So there's so much value in being a doula. It is a
Yeah.
lot of work, and it's okay for people listening who are becoming doulas or are doulas. Like, it's okay to ask for money. Like,
It is. And it's okay in the beginning too, I think. And this is something that I heard somebody else say recently, and it really struck me, because it's probably one of my biggest regrets, is in the beginning that I, was um, a, a a doula in training, even though I had gone through all of the courses, like, and had all like had the knowledge that they enough that the you know instructors are like, okay, well, you're free to go out in the world now and start doing births, and you have to do this many to get certified. And to think that I did births for free because I was a doula in training. It If I could do it again, I wouldn't do it that way, because like you said, there's value in that work. And I think um, we shouldn't um, discredit how how much goes into being a doula. And like you said, we live on call, and I mean, it you can't predict when a baby is going to be born, and
They like
it
to be born at the wee hours.
yeah. Yes, and like the just times when you've got stuff going on, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna leave this grocery cart in the middle of the grocery store or whatever. It's just, yeah, it is that life, and you gotta and it's hard. Yeah, you want to be able to serve everybody too. um the people, especially the people that need it and that don't maybe have that opportunity to um afford it. And that's not to say that you don't charge anything, but you can, I mean, if you feel comfortable giving a discounted rate to somebody who needs it, who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a doula, yeah, do it. Just, still make sure that you feel like it's for you, that you are, um, you know, that you're getting all of the value from it, not just monetary, but also like, you know, the experience too of being
Hmm.
able to support somebody. And yeah, it's it's yeah, I agree with you. It's hard to
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
for money in the beginning. It
yeah,
definitely is.
for sure. Before we wrap up, I know you're super passionate about postpartum.
Yes.
You do postpartum as well, or just birth?
Yes,
Okay.
in the beginning, I actually, like, most of my work was postpartum, and now it's kind of transitioned to mostly birth. But is something that I like. I do two prenatal appointments with my clients, and the second one I always focus on talking about postpartum and like setting them up for success with that, and discussing, um, what that might look like for them, and giving them different tips and tools, and expectations for friends and family to help out, and support and all of that, because I am so passionate about it.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or tools that you want to leave the listeners with?
Sure. I would say the first 5 days, I think, are like the most important days for rest and healing. I mean, they usually say the first 15 days, and it definitely is. But I say, enjoy that time with your partner and your baby, and bonding. And it's okay to set up boundaries with people. Aunt Sally does not need to see the baby within like the first 24 hours of the baby's home. Aunt Sally can wait a week. It's okay. To have that moment of bonding, rest and healing, um, so important about healing inside. Like, nobody thinks about, how you got to let your uterus heal. And um and um yeah, and I think it's okay to tell people, to set expectations, like, um if you're offering to help, I would love you to do this for me, I would love you to do that for me. And I think it's okay to, I try to encourage my clients to ask for help,
Yeah.
and also accept the help too when it's brought to
Hmm.
you. Like,
Hmm.
it's really hard. It's a very hard thing. A lot of us humans have a hard time with it. We like to be independent, and we like to say, okay, I can do this. But there are moments where you need to ask for help, and there's moments where if somebody just offers it, where you gotta accept it, and just, because it's so important, to have that support during that time period. And postpartum keeps going. It doesn't just stop. It just keeps going. And yeah, I like to encourage my clients to line up their people, then line up their people that they want for support. I always say, think of the first three people that you would call in an emergency. Those are your people.
Hmm.
Those are your people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Setting yourself up postpartum. I feel like the setting boundaries is really important because we come from like I feel like for so long it was, oh, we're going to see the baby right away. Like after we had our kids, my husband was like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible for how my family's been doing everything. He comes from like a huge Italian family. And even when his cousins were having babies, like they'd all go to the hospital and see them. They'd all be there in the waiting room. They'd all be seeing the baby like within the first 24 hours, like all this stuff. And then we had our baby during COVID. So nobody was allowed. Like we had our doula, our midwife, and like the staff, but like nobody was allowed. And we would have had people there probably. And we're both like, oh my gosh, we're so thankful that we couldn't have anybody, because like we realized how amazing that was to like just have us and to just be us and then bond after and all of that. So it's definitely, you can say no. And if they're like, but we always do this, be like, that's okay. Like, I've just done a lot of research on really the importance of me resting and bonding with the baby. And we'll let you know when we're ready to have people. Like, it doesn't have to be like, no, you can't come. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just be like, we're really enjoying our time bonding as a new family and just getting used to each other. And we would love to have you over in a couple weeks, like whatever it is. And when you come, bring a meal.
Yes.
But it's crazy because he was like, we always did that. And like after babies were born, his family, what they do, like we would host people over, like over the next month, people would come over, come see the baby, and I would put out snacks and food for them. So I remember when I was pregnant, I'm like, what? Your family does what? So I'm like, you're telling me after your mom pushed you out, like this next week, visitors are coming over and she's putting out snack trays for them? I was like, no, that's not happening. Like, we are not doing that. And he's like, I was talking to his mom about it too. She's like, well, it's just nice to have like, coffee cake, coffee, whatever, for when people come. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I have water if you want some. Like, I'm not getting up and putting together anything for people to come over after I have the baby. Like, and again, everything happened the way it did. It was over COVID. Like, we just didn't have anybody. And then that's when people just started like dropping off stuff. And I'm like, the system works so much better.
It does.
Like, hey, we just dropped a little gift off at your door. Enjoy. And it's like, great. Like, we'll see you guys when we're out and about. Or like, when you guys want to come over in a couple months, like just not right away. It's way too much. I'm like, I'm not picking up my house so people can come over right now. Like, no way.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
But if you want to do it that way, that's fine. But like, for me, that's not how I would want to do it.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, but I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. For people listening, where can they connect with you? And then where do you offer your services at?
So I am located in Buffalo, New York. My business is called Fertile Roots Doula Services. You can find me on Instagram at fertile_roots. I'm also on Facebook, and I'm around. I'm here.
Awesome. I love my conversation with you. I just feel like it's hard when I'm talking with a fellow doula, because I'm like, we could go a million different directions and we could talk forever about everything. So we like touched on a little bit of everything today. So I hope you listeners got some out of it. And if you have deeper questions, feel free to reach out to Lindsay, reach out to me, and we can talk with you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Oh, before we go, I always joke that I always have a million drinks with me. I'll have like coffee, water, sparkling water, and a tea. And I'm like, what is happening? What is your go-to beverage?
Oh, I think my go-to beverage is I'm a sparkling water person. It's constantly has to be in our fridge, or I don't know why I have such an aversion to just regular water. I mean, I do drink it, but I love sparkling water. Yeah.
Same.
How about you?
No, I mean, I drink a little bit of everything, but I drink normal water a lot. But yeah, I mean, I like sparkling water too. So I usually try to limit myself to one sparkling water a day.
Oh,
so that's like my limit.
Wow, you all the power to you, because
Maybe sometimes too. It's refreshing. It is refreshing. Like sometimes I feel like your throat just craves it. Like it wants the bubbles.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
It
the sweater's
does.
not even itching my throat. Like I need a tickle in my throat.
Yep. I like it when I get like a lemon lime one, and it's like, oh, this is like the flavor of a Sprite, but without the sugar. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so refreshing. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, again,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and I'm
Thank you
sure
for
that you and
having
I,
me.
yeah, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.